right, let me get a voice check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're off. Well, hello, glue troopers. Hold on, let me put this out of the way. Oh, I left my drinking glass over there. Hang on just a second. Great way to start, huh?
Hey, why not?
Why not? Hey, well, everybody, welcome. I hope everybody's having a wonderful evening. I have Ken with me. Steve, unfortunately, had family duties, so maybe he'll catch up with us later. But either way, we're off to the races. And
tonight it's just the Ken show with Max.
Pardon moi. Here, Ken, let me hang up, and we'll see if it's still the Ken show. So, anyway, I remember we just saw Elvis. I know what happens when the backup pack gets too big. So, man, I tell you what, they just creeped me out. Tom Hanks playing the Colonel, the fat suit and everything. I was like, anywho, good movie though. So, must watch for all the Elvis fans. Well, guys, tonight we're going to talk about modeling in the 80s, which was not a banner time for kit model building. And one of the things that I only had a little bit of time today. I mean, I had plenty of time today, but it just takes so long to collate the data that I was only able to get a couple of years for comparison. But as a lot of you guys know, by the 1980s, a couple of companies like Aurora were already gone. And what? When you snicker, I'm like, what? What are they saying about me?
Chris Pacer said, he's right, it's the Ken show.
Oh, look, Ken, we're having communication problems. Click. And then it's all about me again. Anywho, for those of you who were model building in the transition between the 70s and the 80s, you're probably keenly aware that many things had changed in modeling, one of which was, and some things had not changed at all. We were still getting a lot of the same kits reboxed, but of course now they were, in a lot of cases, we were getting pictures on the cover of the built model instead of the beautiful artwork we were used to. And of course that had started back in the early 70s. But the 80s, and I went in the Army in 79, so I was doing very little model building. But what I distinctly remember about the 80s was going into places where I used to buy models, which were largely like department store places. Like, for those of you who remember TG&Y, Toys, Games, and Yo-Yos is what we used to call it. But Kmart's and places like that, and the model selections had really gotten weak. Companies like Advent had started up, and they only lasted a couple of years, and they were just reboxing old Revell kits. And I decided to go ahead and take a little look at how many new models, how many new molds were being cut. And I don't mean reboxes by a different company. I mean actually new tooling. And you have to remember that what
in the 80s or now?
In the 80s. We're going to get to now. We're going to get to now later. It's an art, Ken. Don't jump ahead to the end of the book.
Sorry, just clarifying.
Fine. We'll forgive you since it's your show. Not
By the way,
our show.
Jackson
Your
Ken,
show.
the master of the ceremony.
He's a master something. Anyway, but you guys have ever seen one of the greatest movies ever made, The Birdcage? Not even our show, your show. So, anywho, so I put together a Excel spreadsheet today because that's what I do. And using scalemates.com as my primary reference, because I only had so much time, I started looking at how many new molds were actually being cut. So I put together some graphics for us, as always. Ken, remind me to remind them of this later, because I want to make this point a couple times during the show. Real quick, I just gave $25 to the Box Art Den. If you go to boxartden.com, look at them. They have a donate page. I use their pictures all the time. They gave me permission to do it. God bless them. And that's why you always see me trying to promote them. And they they're coming up on their 3-year renewal for their website. And of course, it's an all volunteer thing, so they're asking for it. And I kicked in 25. And a lot of other folks have kicked in some money. So if you guys ever go to the Box Art Den, you like it, you want to throw them a few bucks, go there and donate a couple of dollars. It would really go a long way towards keeping it running. It's a fantastic website. They take all the old box art. For those who haven't been there, they take all the old box art and they basically, using graphic programs, make it like new. And every week or so, they'll pop a new one out. And you see their images. I use them all the time, and they're beautiful. And they also do some fantasy box art, which is what got me to do some of that fantasy box art before. And I'll probably, remind me, I'll mention this again later. But if you do that, I mean, it's a great resource. The couple of people who do it, JR, and they're all volunteers, man. And as someone who runs a website for it's a YouTube channel for the fun of it, I understand how much work goes into that. And yes, it's a labor of love, but it's still a labor, and it does have expenses. So up to your conscience. Guilt trip. So anyway, back to what we're talking about. So let's start off with the year 1980. And some companies were on their last legs and were putting out very little new in the way of new cut molds. And some companies were actually, I tend to think in 1980 is kind of a breaking point. The 70s and the 80s, model building was waning in the 70s, but 1980 it was no longer, I kind of consider that when it was really on the decline. And in 1980, Hasegawa, where did my spreadsheet go? There it is. Hasegawa and Tamiya did not put out very many new kits, but they did put out some. In 1980, I have to look down my list here. Where'd it go? Okay, Hasegawa put out 17 new kits in 1980. And hold on, I like to be face to face with the. Here we go. Just move that over. Now you can see me in all of my glory. Lucky you. So Hasegawa put out 17 new kits in 1980. These were new toolings. And that was actually one of the larger numbers. And Tamiya, I cannot believe I don't have Tamiya on the list here. Oh, there it is. 22. Tamiya put out 22. That was the year Tamiya put out their rather famous Grumman F-14A Tomcat. And but they put out a lot of motorcycles and cars mostly. And I was looking at what was being made by the different companies also. And in the case of Tamiya, it was mostly cars and motorcycles, a lot of race cars. They did do a few airplanes. Hasegawa, more aircraft oriented. Some of them, I think they put out a couple of the little comic, egg planes. But what do you think about how big these companies are? That's a reasonable number. 17 and 22 is pretty good. So they were going strong. You're going to find the numbers on the Japanese companies are a lot stronger than the numbers on the American companies. And Japan was on the ascent, and America was on the decline. Japan had been on the ascent since the late 60s and throughout the 70s. And I'm sure some of you guys have probably built some of these kits. I'd be interested to hear your experiences with them. A lot of these kits are still in production today. But it just goes to show you that they were going gangbusters. But and another company that was really going bananas, this is really when they were starting to explode, was Matchbox. And this was kind of their heyday. In 1980, Matchbox put out, and you got to remember, they were not as, and now, they were a big company in that they, had come from Matchbox cars, Lesney, and all that stuff. But they, as models went, they weren't that big of a model company yet, but they were on the climb. And they put out 17 new kits in 1980. And at 1981, they put out only 3. Now, I have a theory on this, but it's only my opinion. You have to remember there's about a year's lead time when you say, let's build this kit, to when they're actually on the shelves in the stores. And I believe what was happening is Matchbox was going through an expansion period. They had a lot of stuff in production, and they managed to get it delivered in 1980, or get the molds, the new tools done in 1980 and start sending them. But they kind of for lack of a better phrase, shot their wad on that, so that by 1981 they had only 3, but those were probably just 3 that didn't really get done in 1980 because they were so busy. And this was kind of when Matchbox was really on the ascent. But 17 in one year and 3 in the next year makes me think that they were working on all 20 of them. They only got a few of them just got delayed was all. But that's totally an inference on my part. And now, Ken, I'm not reading the comments. If there's anything I need to comment on, I'm expecting you to. Yeah, and then Leslie bought AMT about that time. Yeah, that's actually AMT, Leslie, and Erdl is kind of a long and ugly story. But anyway, so in the early 80s, Matchbox was definitely hitting its stride. Now, one company that did better than I expected was Heller out of France. And Heller had managed to crank out 14 new kits in 1980. Now, given the size of the company, that's actually pretty respectable. And they were making stuff that you weren't going to find too many other places, like the Canadair and the Fuga, you know, and the Saab J21. A lot of people never even heard of a Saab J21. And they were not afraid to make some stuff that other people, you know, just didn't seem to be interested in. And, you know, as is often happens with models, I learned a lot about, like, cars I'd never heard of by saying, I'd never heard of an Alpine, you know, and I'm a kid from the panhandle of Florida, and you go to the store, Alpine? Oh, what's that? Of course, there was no internet in those days, so you just believed whatever they put on the side of the box. We'd believe anything in those days. If it was in print, it was real, right, Ken?
That's right.
But, and the next year they put out 6 more. So, Heller was actually going pretty strong. And they're still around today, although I think they're actually owned by a German company now. But the brand has managed to survive. I've done videos on all these companies like Heller, and even I have to go back and watch them in videos to keep the details straight. But they, give them credit, they've slugged along. They're kind of like the French flagship for kit models. And they've made stuff that a few odds and ends that you just don't find other places. They also helped me to realize just how much there is to make models of. And we're gonna we're gonna be touching on that when we get to Green Max. By the way, Ken,
Yes.
I know you're into model railroading. Have you ever heard of a company that makes accessories for in scale called Green Max?
Not too much into N scale, but I haven't heard that one now.
Okay. Well, I've got a picture. I don't know if I'd even heard of them before I was doing research today. And they're primarily, N scale is 1 to 150, correct?
N?
Yeah.
No, it's 1 to 1/60th.
Oh, yeah. Like anyone's going to tell 1 to 150 to 1 to 160 with the naked eye. They make a lot of N-scale stuff, and they make a lot of 1 to 150 stuff. But we'll get into that when we get down the list of things here. But that was a new one on me. I figure being a member of the railroad club, you know, model railroading all your life, you would know these things. But perhaps I give you too much credit.
Somebody has to.
Robbie.
Uh-oh. According to James, I'm way too loud. That's a new.
That's new. I'll move the phone back a little. The communicator. There we go. All right. One of the problems we have with the audio is that even though you may be hearing everybody's equipment reads different code different ways, and some people's equipment will pick something up that other people do, and it's hard to get a uniform audio. But I gotta have getting back to, I have to give Heller credit. Although they mostly did cars and planes and helicopters, they were managed. They had a pretty strong model going there, and they managed to stay in the industry and stay relevant. Now, I think they were bigger in Europe than they were here, but I do remember seeing them, you know, at some of the better equipped hobby shops. I got a mustache here that keeps hanging on my lip. That's why I keep doing this. Sorry about that. So,
no, I've never dressed up like Casey Jones. Not once.
You're missing out, brother. Casey Jones, what's your speed? In fact, Ken...
Your clanking ice is too loud as well.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, you really got to cut down on the drinking prop there.
There are some frequencies. It's like last week when Debbie was doing something in the background that was a piercing noise, or metallic noises, ice hitting glass, or certain higher frequency noises that just come right through and drown out everything else. And they can be piercing because the human ear, as well as the human eye, is more sophisticated than any recording device, any camera, any audio device, the fidelity in it, and as far as equalizing all of these things. But a lot of the mechanical stuff just lets it drown you out. Okay, enough of that. So, in fact, Ken,
Jack seems to think that you got a small cast iron pan right there in front of you.
this is the pop blocker. Okay, it's supposed to stop the hard sound when you make say things that start with P, like pop blocker. And it worked in the store when I bought it, so it was $20.
Basically, it's supposed to make them sound better.
Yeah, you will see a screen in front of a lot of microphones, and that's what it's for, is to stop the hard. Because we're talking about how the human ear can pick things up better than more accurately the mechanical devices. Mechanical devices are certain sounds, like the sound, that if you put this little, it's just this fabric, this screens, two fabric screens, but apparently it takes that edge off the sound wave and doesn't disrupt the rest of the sound. That's the way it's supposed to work. So, Peter piked a pocket perky pickles, Peter piked a pocket perky pickles, that kind of thing. Anyway, so
I think you need to stick it a little closer to the mic.
there it is. It's basically sitting on it now. It's got to have room to vibrate to absorb but just a little bit. There we go. Okay. I need I need a feeler gauge. But we're gapping spark plugs here.
Yeah, we could go sideways on that one.
I caught that because I almost said it. Come on, I'm only my first guy kill. Ain't that for you? Don't worry, another hour. This is going to get entertaining. So anyway,
especially when you get too much cough medicine.
You know what? I got tired of taking breaks and running in the other room, so I brought my grown-up juice with me today.
Yeah, back on the subject.
Okay. Okay, this is all just being done for comedic effect. Oh, don't advertise a product unless they want to pay me. So anyway, so Heller has done actually a pretty amazing job given everything that they're up against. Now, there is one thing about all this that I need to elucidate on, and that is that we're starting with 1980. But remember, we had fuel crisis in 73, and we had another fuel crisis in 79. So in 73 and 79, the price of styrene products skyrocketed, and both of them were catastrophic for the industry. Now, Aurora was gone before the first one, but Monogram managed to muddle through. And Monogram and Revell both hit a double whammy. They'd been clobbered by the slot car crash in 65, and then they were clobbered by the 73 fuel crisis. And, of course, that basically Revell Aurora was taken out. And, of course, they also had the disadvantage, depending on whose versions you want to believe, that, Dyker had taken over and they were no longer really a kit model company. But, so Aurora probably could have lasted as a kit model company and been a big name even today. In a way, in a backward way, they still are, thanks to Atlantis. But you know what I mean? They could have survived as a company, but we've already covered that ground. So, by 79, with the second oil crisis that hit in 79, and it was just not, and that's, by the way, the year I went in the Army, it was just not a real good time for it to be in a petroleum-based industry, and the kit models are, it's styrene, it's a petroleum product. So, by 1980, a few of them they're trying to keep some stuff coming out. Somehow Heller manages to stay relevant and keep it going, and it's a tough job. But one company that was really ailing in 1980 was Airfix. As big as Airfix is, this is all they put out in the way of new molds in 1980. This is their entire, at least according to ScaleMates, This is their entire 1980 set of new tools. And 8 isn't bad, okay? But it ain't great. They put out 4 jets, a truck, a cannon, a bird, a dinosaur, and 3 prop jobs. And I kind of got to give him credit, but this is when Airfix was really starting to hurt. And it was not, as I just said, it wasn't a great time for anybody, but for these guys. And then there were, I am not an expert. What?
A bird?
Yeah, the Kingfisher.
Yeah, I got that, but a bird?
Several companies made wildlife models, Ken. The bear, the horse, there were several bird kits made. I don't know how popular they were, but they kept making them, so they must have been selling. I think part of it is that these model companies, and I'm guessing here, in light of what happened to Lou and Royal Glazer back in the late '60s, when they were getting peppered by PTA meetings and like, why are you making war toys? Because that's what sells. So they kept trying to make more educational toys or models, and some of them didn't sell that well. But they're like, look, we're a business, we got to stay alive. And kids like rockets and planes and tanks and jets, and submarines and battleships. Birds don't intrigue them that much. I mean, there's a certain core for that, but a lot of them want to make some educational toys. One, I think, hopefully to enter into the educational market, which was lucrative if you could get into it. But also, I think to some extent, they were kind of like, look, this way, if we catch any flack, hey, look, we're making these nice, educational toys as well. Lighten up, Francis. But whatever the case, that was one of the 2 of the kits they put out were, a Petrodon and a Pterodon. I call it Petrodon, and a Kingfisher, which I have no idea what their sales numbers were. Not a clue. Some modelers liked them just because they represented a new challenge. Knowing how to rust tank tracks and, paint chip an airplane is one skill, but a bird, you're in a whole new world there, and a lot of people like the challenge. But couldn't begin to tell you I have no idea what their sales numbers were. But another thing to look at is that Airfix in 1980, as big a company it was, you have to remember, Ken, and those of you who are viewing in from UK or Crown colonies can please chime in on this. But it's my understanding that in the UK and the former Crown colonies, that the word Airfix is so synonymous with kit models that they use it the way Americans say Kleenex when they mean a tissue, or Velcro when they mean hook and loop fastener. That people will say, oh, it's an Airfix for any kit model. It just means kit model. That's how big Airfix is in that part of the world. And a company that big only put out, this little number of, what was it, I got there 11 or 12 new kits. What are you snickering at?
Ray Wyatt. Somebody earlier said, isn't anybody reading the comments? And I said, yeah, somebody has to say something profound. So Ray Wyatt said, profound. You got me now.
Good on you, Ray. Well, in a hint of the way things were going for Airfix, the next year in 81, they only put out 8 new kits. And so in 1980, Airfix put out 13 new kits, and in 81 they only put out 8. So they were still making new molds, and they were still keeping their head above water, but what in the glory days. But in 2020, they only put out 4. And 2 of those are the same kit in different versions. The Mark 5C Spitfire, one with the trope accoutrements. That was, in 2020, that was a sum of Airfix's new molds. Now, don't get me wrong, Airfix is doing a lot better now. They've cleaned up a lot of the old molds, modified them, and they've changed hands several times. Most of the stuff's popped in India now, but at least they're still alive. And they are putting out new kits, but it just goes to show you how, now, in fairness, before I go any further, there is something I want to point out. every company has a mold bank. And when you have a mold bank that has 600-700 kits, or even 200 or 300, you've made a lot of the best-selling stuff. It makes sense that you're not going to make as many new molds because you've got so many. The old ones can be modified or cleaned up. But eventually you realize, you know what, we're going to have to start making some changes. Now, what constitutes a new kit? You build a Monogram Mustang from 1970 and one from 1998, and they're both 148 scale Monogram Mustang, but they're completely different kits. Now, they may have used the wings and the tail and the fuselage from the original kit, but they added a lot of detail to the cockpit and the canopy and the landing gear and the wheel wells and stuff in 98. I don't know if they started with the original molds and just added parts, or if they modified the molds, or if they cut completely new ones. So I'm not really sure. But I built so many Monogram kits as a kid, mostly airplanes, and I love finding old ones like that Emil and the Zero that I built recently, and they're very basic. But in 1970, they were the nicest kits out there from 148 scale for $1. And so if you're going to stay competitive, you have to have a good product. And that means if you are using a 30-year-old mold that's probably a little worn out and getting flashy and doesn't have much detail, it's time to cut a brand new tool for it. And but that's an expensive prospect and time consuming, even with modern equipment. So kudos to Airfix for at least coming out with new kits. But you can, and I was watching the numbers. Their numbers were on the decline. In 1980, Airfix had put out 13 new kits, and then 1981 they only put out 8. And there were some years it was hard to get a. I didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of research, but we're going to talk about some things that happened later. Now, one of the things that impacts new kits is what's going on. For example, AMT in 1981. Let me see if I got this slide handy. Well, we'll get to that. In 1980, AMT only put out 2 new toolings, and in 1981, they put out, I think it was here. I lost my place. Yeah, they put out 7. But a bunch of those were the new Star Wars kits because the new Star Wars movie had come out. So, kudos on them for putting out the new kits, but that was because they had something new to make. And we're going to be getting into that in a little bit. But I had noticed that from about 1978-79, a lot of these companies were a lot of the American and European companies were putting out progressively less models. Now, I think it was 83, Revell sells out to a French company called the Compagnie des Jouets, I think was the name of it. A French company.
What does that translate to?
The French model company. Or the French toy company, I think. And I noticed that in the early to mid 80s, I think it was 85, Revell started putting out some pretty weird stuff, and this was one of them. Now, you see that little company up to that little left of the Revell logo? That little weird Play-Doh man? I forgot you're on the phone and you're getting it faster than it's loading on your computer.
Who, you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it yet.
Okay, it just popped up on my iPad. So
there it is.
All right. Now I'm going to enlarge it. It'll be enlarging on your screen in a few seconds. But you look where it says Revell, and to the left you have the little like a little Play-Doh man. It says Seiju. Okay. That is the logo, I believe, for the French company that had bought Revell. And of course they start making, French-oriented stuff as well as their regular stuff. But they decided we need some new models, so they start making like this Eiffel Tower amongst. And don't get me wrong, I think that'd be awesome posed next to a Godzilla model. Or you can have your little German half-tracks driving underneath it. Whatever. I'm not going to get into the German French jokes, I swear. Okay.
Yeah, might be too late for
Okay.
that.
Too soon. But anyway, I have no idea how well these things sold. But I don't ever recall seeing one in a store, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. But as an airplane and tank and car builder, it would have been invisible to me.
You would have had to build some really small airplanes to have them flying around it.
Or some really large monsters. Mwah!
That too.
I'm sorry, Ken, but you build a 1 to 385 scale structure like that, all right, and nothing else is made in 1 to 385 scale, you're just begging for me to pose an Aurora monster beside it. I mean, a giant Wolfman or giant Frankenstein, you know. But I'm sorry, that needs a King Kong or a Godzilla. I'm sorry, that's what large model structures are for. Kaiju. I stand by that.
Okay, Sluggo,
Slugo, whatever.
Slugo, whatever.
Slugo.
He wants to know how you and I met, but we can talk about that later.
Later, yeah. Well, Ken had just been dumped by a girlfriend, and you know.
Oh.
Joking. He's already married with 3 kids when I met him. French Airfix pressings were HARs. That's okay. Salvage B24 says that they were nightmares, and I don't doubt it. Just looking at all that lattice work.
The one market that they might have done well with this would have been with tourists in France.
I know what you mean, and they would probably have sold a few, but generally speaking, tourists want something that's done, they can throw it in their bag, and it won't break on the way home. Or such as my marketing expertise. Okay, so, anyway. Again, the 80s, not a good time for Revell. Now, this is the sum total of Revell's product enhancement in 1980. There were 4 cars, the Chips motorcycles, 3 jets. Although I have to admit, though, the F-104 and the F-18 were in 1 to 32nd scale. So that's kind of cool. But in 1980, which was just a couple of years before they sold to Compagnie des Jeux, and I'm sure I'm butchering that. If any of you guys speak French, I apologize now. But this is the sum total of their new tooling for 1980. And it's just, given how big of a company that Revell was, that's not great. I mean, at least they were cutting some new molds, and of course the TV show Chips was big, so again, you have to have something new to mold. But you have to get the rights for that kind of stuff, and that's not always a cheap thing to do. But, although I'll give them credit, in 81 they came up with 15 new molds, so they were trying.
Could it be that after a while you just kind of run out of subject material?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Exactly right. That's what I like the Chips model, because that's why one reason they like to make models of new versions of cars that look very different, or so that they need something new to make a model of. It's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons they stay abreast of changes in the military, changes in automobiles, changes in media and Hollywood. You're absolutely right, Ken. You've got to have something new to make a model of. Every company that ever made a model probably made a Mustang, a Zero, and you know you're just banging your head against the wall. And every company had its thing. Aurora went for be the first on the market and keep the price point low. Revell went for keep the aircraft looking good, but we got to get them out not as quick as Aurora to the point that they look terrible. They got to look better. But I think it was a Revell UH1 in I think it was 1/32nd scale. And I remember looking at it and going, this isn't right. It just had too much of a teardrop shape. And even as a kid, I knew the fuselage and the nose cone weren't shaped right. But Revell had to get them to the market so they could. Monogram, on the other hand, waited until they got it the way they wanted it. And they had a slightly smaller catalog, but a lot of people felt that Monogram made the best models, especially in cars.
I think I built the Revell 1/32nd F-18, although it had a different picture on it. It had a picture of the test model that was painted in white and gold and blue, I think.
Yeah, that actually, I don't think that was Revell. It might have been. I found in somewhere in here, I don't know, one of them, I found one in that paint scheme. Yeah, that's another thing. It's like when the F-16 was brand new and it was red, white, and blue. Very patriotic because it was, around the bicentennial. And a lot of people don't realize that test model of the F-16, which I think Monogram cranked it out first, it was a good model. I remember building it when I was in a hospital bed in the Army because I'd broken my legs in a parachute accident, but that's another story. So anyway, they had what they called occupational therapy. You could get a model for free from occupational therapy. They needed some paint and brushes, but that was it. No tape, no nothing else. So it was a monster build. It looked terrible. Just something to keep you busy. But that airplane actually has a wing that's about 20% smaller than the F-16 that wound up going into the field. So when they make that model and you paint it in that paint scheme, it's accurate. But a lot of people bought that model and put it in a combat paint scheme. Like, well, that's not actually the airplane that was fielded. But it was something new to make. And the model companies were thrilled when, the fighter mafia was finally getting the F-15, the F-16, the A-10. We've got something new to make models of. Hallelujah. The kids will buy. The kids, they love this. And they do. And we all bought them. But this shows you the small number of kits that were being cranked out. And although they did better in 81, I think they were moving towards a Hail Mary there. But some of the companies, however, a lot of the Japanese companies were actually on the ascent. And let me give you an example. Aoshima, right, which is still in business today, family-owned business, still owned by the same family, so it has survived. They managed to crank out, in 1980, they managed to crank out, I believe it was 30 brand new toolings. I mean, that's over 2 a month. That's moving. And they did 59 in 1981. Now, admittedly, some of them were this rather, shall we call it, interesting stuff in the left column, which is Japanese sci-fi fiction kind of stuff. And I'm gonna stick my foot in my mouth here again and say that I don't think that's quite as hard as making something like the motorcycles on the right. They also did a lot of railroad models, and not actual, like rolling stock, just models. So Aoshima's, they've kind of always been in their own world, but being a Japanese company, they have a domestic market that Americans pretty much don't understand. Then they've got trains, which I'm like, okay, they're selling a bunch of them. God knows they make plenty of them. And a lot of that also, I think, is local Japanese stuff, but it sells in Japan, and they got the other stuff, like the cars, that sell very well. One thing I remember from doing the Aoshima history video is that, if I remember, it was Aoshima that the guy who founded the company had actually trained to be a pilot just before the war at a civilian flying school. He was a very patriotic, so most of their aircraft are Japanese military aircraft, if I remember correctly. But they do a lot of sci-fi and fantasy kind of stuff. So Aoshima is a very different company. I mean, they march to the tune of their own drummer. I've built a few of their kits. I have no complaints about the quality. They're exactly what you expect from a Japanese company. I'm going to make some ice tinkling noise here.
Chris says it's dinner time. He can't wait any longer for you to go off script.
You want me to go off script? All right, I'll go off script right now for you then, by golly. Because scripts are for... Wait a minute, how can I go off script when I don't even have a script?
Tangent, maybe?
A tangent. Okay. I'll tell you a tangent. There I was, skydiving hard, just like in that photograph over here. And I'm landing, I'm coming in to land in my square rig canopy, my big, cloud light, getting ready to flare, and about 50 feet off the ground. All of a sudden, the canopy starts lurching back and forth. Like, what's going on? And I look up, and up on the upper lip of my canopy, I see a pair of tennis shoes with feet wobbling in them. Like, what? And my canopy wrapping around them. I'm like, this idiot's trying to do canopy relative work at 50 feet. What I didn't realize is another fellow in a much smaller canopy was coming down in front of me. He couldn't see me because I was behind him. I'm below him, and my canopy had a flatter glide, and we into each other. And my canopy ate him and wrapped around him, and we both cratered. I broke both legs, which is why I got to sit in the hospital building the Monogram 1/72 scale prototype.
You never told me that
F-16.
story. You told me you broke your leg when you're skydiving, and that's why you couldn't go into the Army and fly helicopters, but you never told me that story.
I was already in the Army. I had a flight school application completed and submitted, and of course, I'm sitting at home with a cast on each leg when I get a call from the company clerk, Corporal McDonald. Hey, Max! Yeah, got great news for you. What? You've been accepted to warrant officer flight training. And I'm sitting at my house with a cast on each leg going, well, isn't that special? By the time my legs healed and I had finished physical therapy and the Army requirement of a 6-month wait between a broken bone and your next Class 1 flight physical, I go in to take the flight physical and pass everything except the right eye was 20/25 because of an astigmatism. And in the post-Vietnam era, where the Army had been rifting reduction in forces, warrant officers and officers back to enlisted grades, it was not uncommon to see a staff sergeant with helicopter pilot wings because he'd been a warrant officer or a second lieutenant, field promotion, in the war in Vietnam, and then when the war was over, they all got rifted back to staff sergeant enlisted grades. And I was like, well, wonderful. And of course, they were not in the mood to grant any waivers, and that was that. They wouldn't not even grant a waiver for my platoon leader, who was a commissioned officer with a college degree. They sure as heck weren't granting a waiver for some snot-nosed Spec 4 with no college and a high school diploma. So that's how that goes. I'm not bitter about it. Not in the slightest. I get everything to the service. Huh? What?
I've never noticed that you were bitter.
Not bitter, Ken. Don't confuse bitter with vengeful. So anyway, so now back to kit models. You should be reading the comment stream. Somebody's got to be saying something. So yes, he fell on my parachute from above. That is essentially what happened.
Yeah, and Dreamberry says, lucky that's all you broke.
Oh.
And Jack said, were you wearing a red shirt?
Well, there was red on my jumpsuit. Close enough. By the way, in all fairness, and I think about this more often than I probably should, not that I'm dwelling on it.
Wait a minute. Did you ever hunt down the guy that landed on top of your chute?
What, Bill Kafer, the little enlisted Army National Guard guy that drifted through my career and then drifted away? No, I never looked him up. Never tried to destroy him. Yeah, okay. I was going to share the picture on the wall, but those things are nailed on. They're not going anywhere. Now,
I'll just pick the camera up and point it at it.
I'm using the camera that's built into the computer.
Oh. Where's the other one?
Okay, hold on. Hang on, I can bring that to life. Stand by. Atomic batteries to power, turbines to speed. Hit the plus button. Hit the button, Max. I need that's not a media source. That is an image capture device. Image capture device. Number 2. There it is. Oh, what did this snag on? Okay. Oops. Move the evidence out of the way. Okay. Hold on, I gotta turn some light on. Try not to get dizzy, guys.
We'll hang in there.
Okay. All right. There's a picture of me standing by a brand new Army UH-60A Blackhawk with my, hadn't even jumped, that was just before my first jump in it, my Wonderhog 2. There's both a main and a reserve on the backpack. And all right. And this, okay, try to get the light where it won't. This is a picture of me using the club gutter gear, skydiving hard over Son DZ at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That would have been 1980. Ha! Which is ironic because we're talking about the 80s.
Well, that's what you said. You went into the Army in 79,
79.
right?
And let me see if I can get some more light on this without... There. That's me and my... At 198 pounds. That's me skinny. And my buddy Al Brown took that photo. So now you guys know the whole... And by the way, just as a side note, that's Bruce Candless in the MMU there, and I met him at a symposium before he'd gone into space. All right. Life-changing event. But, hey, you know, life happens. And,
It does.
well, you know what, Ken? One could argue it serves me right for going skydiving when I knew I had an Army Flight School application pending. I should have been hiding behind chairs until that happened. But it went the way it went. I'm flying jets now, so in the end it all worked out. So, back to models. So Aoshima has done a great job of understanding their local market as well as the international market. They stayed in business. They were cranking out. They were really on the climb in the 80s. And another company that was going gangbusters was Bandai. And from what I can gather, they hold the record. In 1980, they had 40 new kits. And this is just a random sampling. You didn't really see much in the way of aircraft. It was mostly Japanese sci-fi, some cars, a few tanks, stuff like that steamroller, which were just different. And then a lot of Japanese warships. And I like it. And now Bandai does make about 40 aircraft. But unlike a lot of companies, that is not the staple of their market. Gundam is the staple of their market, and Star Wars and sci-fi. That's got to be their bread and butter. And as we all know, Bandai is still around today. Not only did Bandai make 40 new molds in 1980. Actually, I'm sorry. They made 40 new kits. So depending on how you count some of the stuff, some people say they made 70, but I think that's counting some other stuff. But supposedly in 1981, Bandai made 87 new kits, but I don't think that's accurate. But still, that would be cranking out a couple of molds a month, 4 molds a month. But the point is as I've told you guys, if you watch the Bandai video, Bandai is probably arguably the largest kit model company in the world right now, certainly by sales. They've sold over 35 million kits since they started going at it, and of course they owe most of that to Gundam. They have just absolutely set in a new bar. Now, having said that, and this is going to cause some controversy, and I'm not out to start a what do they call it, a flame war, but the reality of the situation is some people don't consider Gundam Bandai Gundam stuff to be quote-unquote real models because you don't have to glue them together. Most things press fit. Having built several of them, I kind of have to fall in the camp of, yeah, they're really models. It's true a lot of the stuff press fits, but it's not like some little snap-tight kit. Some of these things have hundreds and hundreds of pieces which are side and ankle specific. If you get the wrong spring or the wrong piece in the wrong place, everything's wrong. They are very complicated. It is a model. However, it's not a traditional model. And it's just, when people submit Gundam to the viewers' builds and stuff and sci-fi, I always show them because I consider them models. And that brings up a kind of a, I hate to start a crap storm, but some people feel like if you don't have to use glue, it doesn't count. And some people are like, no, it comes with 500 parts, instructions. You got to fit it. It's a model. And by the way, I have yet to build a Gundam. I didn't have to use some glue on. But that can get into blasphemy.
Slugo says they're toys.
Okay, I'm going to let you guys, I'm going to be Switzerland on this one. I'll let you guys slug that one out because we have some Gundam builders here. But, one of the good things about Gundam, it does get a lot of the younger generation interested in building models because a lot of them are into Gundam. I'll let you guys fight that one out. I don't... But I get it. I understand why people who build traditional kits don't look at Gundam, and they are different. It is a different skill set, but it's, you know, it's made of styrene. It's still a model, but you're right. You know, it's something you can play with when you're done. Although they pop apart as soon as you try. So, and I've seen some of these things right down here in Daytona Beach is Gundam USA, and I've been there and I've seen some of the builds, and they are master build quality stuff. But and they use most of the same techniques we use. And I would might add that they also carry a full range of like Mr. Color paints. It's one of the best stock stores I've been to on paints. And I haven't used Mr. Color yet or Vallejo. In fact, funny you guys should mention that. You know what? Now I'm going to zip off on a tangent. Ian is considering getting either Mr. Color or Vallejo, and he asked me which one he should get. And I said, well, for kit models, the reason I would recommend Vallejo is model builders recognize it, and they're more inclined to buy it, and you're a business and you need to sell stuff. But I've heard great things about Mr. Color. So if you guys have used Vallejo and or Mr. Color, especially if you use both, I would love to hear what you've got to say about that. So that's all I have to say about that. Not really. I have lots more to say, but time to move on.
Well, I'm gonna jump in on the Gundam controversy.
Oh, pray tell, Ken, what beeth the opinion of the guy who only bought his second plastic model recently? Ken bought a vintage Aurora Cherokee, guys. He actually went out and bought a model.
I did from England.
Mm-hmm. So let's hear your opinion, ye who only builds RCs and trains.
Oh, like building model trains is so simple. Anyway.
And that thud you heard was the sound of the gauntlet hitting the ground.
Okay. Models, whether you glue them together, whether they come pre-built, or they come from tiny pieces of sheet plastic or even balsa wood, it's still a model because it represents something that's real or that could be real.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, I can go with that. Now, I'm just going to sit back and wait a few seconds for all the hate to start pouring in.
Yeah, and other people say if you don't carve it from a block of wood, it's not really modeling.
You see, guys, that pendulum swings both ways. Or should I say that X-Acto knife cuts both ways? Trust me, I know.
I mean, that's why we buy models, is because they're representations of things that we see that in real life we can't own, but we'd like to have something that reminds us of it, so we go and get one.
Well, it's even more than that, Ken, but you're right. But you go back to the cave paintings and the carvings of ancient Rome and Greece and Egypt. Humanity has always had a fascination with life in miniature. It's just part of who we are. And
we see something and we want to be reminded of it, or we want to make a representation of it, or we just want to remember it.
Well,
so
also
we get
with
something similar to it.
Well, also with us, the group that's watching now, there's also a lot to be said that model building is not only a representation of life in miniature, but for many of us, what? Okay, what are you laughing at?
Jack Fleming fan says we buy models to drive the wives nuts.
I never drive my wife nuts. I love my wife. She's a wonderful person.
You don't want to drive your wife nuts.
She's a wonderful, magnificent, beautiful person who watches this live stream. So anyway, you're forgiven for being late, Trey. Everybody, Trey's late. Everybody, round of applause for Trey.
Hey, Trey, glad you finally managed to make it.
Jeez, we can start the meeting now.
Yeah, we were waiting for you.
Actually, guys, and I put this out in a video recently. I owe a thanks to Trey. I watched his video on the Tiger and that he's been working on, and the half track, and that finally got me off my butt and got me to crank open that Pershing that I just did, and had a great time with it. I want to thank you, the Glue Trooper, that sent that to me, and I really enjoyed that build. I think we're going to talk about this.
For a second there, Paul Adams made a comment. He said, my Matchbox die-cast are models. They're just not kids. I do not have a wife. And I thought he was going to say, but I built one. But he says, I build models.
I am a Weisenheimer comment just shot through my mind, but I am just going to let it go. There. You know what? We're going to shift gears for a second since we're talking about the Pershing. There it is on the shelf with proper infantry support, I might add. And this is something I wanted to mention. You guys will notice that there's decals on the chassis on the side, but there's no decals on the turret. Now, and I am totally sailing off on a tangent here, but it's relevant, so stay with me.
Well, we haven't done one of those for a while, so it's about time.
It's about time. We're overdue. It's tangent time. It's tangent time. Yes, it's tangent time. So, here's the dealio on this, okay? And we've got right side and left side security, and those guys behind the tank providing left side security. We have the reserve guys to the rear in case they're called up. We have the radio man who's about to give a message to the courier, and we have the lieutenant who's giving commands to the flamethrower guy. We got the mine detector guy out in front of the tank, the bazooka team, and the M60 laying suppressive fire. So you can tell I was in the infantry. I literally spent about 5 minutes arranging these guys trying to figure out how would the squad actually be around a tank, because we did that stuff. Anyway, you will notice...
Was she the guy that actually hauled the M60?
I have my hero photo with it, and I did a little bit, but primarily I was the RTO and the M203 gunner guy. But trust me, what you want to be as a basic rifleman, lightest load. But anyway, you will notice on this side of the turret, and this is the test vehicle number 2, there are no decals on the right side of the turret, no markings. Now, there are supposed to be. And something that every model builder knows, and I know, and I actually did, but it didn't register. You will notice right under the 50 caliber, on the side of the turret, there is a track rack. That is what the spare pieces of track clip onto. There is a decal that's supposed to go under that. So at some point, I need to pluck that off, put the decal on, and then re-glue it on. If it turns out to be too well bonded, I am not breaking it. I put too much work into that tank. But, so the little word of wisdom is, and the thing is, I did it and it didn't register. What I didn't realize when I was looking at the decals for the tank is that there are 2 different ways to decal it. Okay, as test vehicle 1, test vehicle 2, or test vehicle 2 went through a couple of different variations on the markings. And people tend to forget that military vehicles, they get repainted all the time. And somebody goes, that's not right. Well, it depends on the point in time you're talking about. So what I should have done was waited to put that last piece on until after the decal was applied, but it didn't register when I read it. Not a lot of decals on this. And again, it does not come with any stars. It is capable of being made as the deployed combat vehicle without the equilibrator, or whatever you call it, equilibrator on top, that big mechanism on top to balance a gun. And they have a different bustle for it if you want to make it the ones that were deployed in Europe. You have to drill out from the inside. So you have to decide early which version am I going to make. What was that?
Rhonda's calling you out on the M60.
What? What are they calling out?
Rhonda, she said M60 machine gun in World War II? I think not.
No. What'd I say? No. That's an Amadeus. Did I say M60?
That's what I thought you said.
I'm sorry. Pardon me. I've been drinking.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. Oh crap! I see what he's getting at. Those are Vietnam or like early '60s infantry. Yeah, the rifleman on the right's got an M14. So yeah, you guys caught me. Oh man, I am so busted. Yeah, we got this infantry unit's from like 1961, and the tank is from 1944. So yeah, I am totally busted. All the infantry are carrying M14s. Except the guys pointing the rifles are carrying, a couple of guys have M1s. You know, this infantry set is all messed up. You've got an M60, an M14,
You're just now noticing this?
Ken, I noticed that a long time ago. I was just I was testing you guys, but that's okay. You passed. I
We'll
was
go
just
with that.
I was just seeing
Okay.
if you would. Yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. No, actually, I noticed that when I pulled them out of the box, I was like, "This ain't right." It's funny. It's funny you should mention that, Ken, because when I was in the Army, our first sergeant, Top Dodson, who's was a good guy, and we had one of the more mellow first sergeants. Anyway, E8 type first sergeant, and real quick for those who don't know, a master sergeant and a first sergeant are the same rank in the E grades. They're both E8s. There's only one rank higher, sergeant major, E9, in the enlisted grades. But if you see a guy with 6 stripes, 3 on top, 3 on bottom in the Army, he's a master sergeant. If you see him the same rank with a diamond in the center, that means he's a first sergeant. They're the same pay grade. The difference in them is a first sergeant holds what's technically considered a command position, whereas the master sergeant carries more of what's considered an administrative or specialty position. So if you're a company first sergeant, you get the diamond because you command troops. But if you're, say, an administrator or a something that doesn't command people, but then you get the master sergeant rank. Same thing for sergeant major and command sergeant major. Sergeant major has a star between the stripes. That just means he's like an administrative post, but a command sergeant major has a wreath around it, so he's like a battalion command sergeant major. He commands troops. I have no idea why I went off on that tangent. Anyway, so
I got a question for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Smith Sr. He said, Max, you should get Revell new 1/8 scale Trans Am. I don't know why Max would, but that sounds interesting to me.
You're the one who needs the 1/8 scale Trans Am, Ken, because you've had a couple of them.
I have. I had a 79 and I had an 82.
Well, getting back to our subject matter of the day.
So, Michael, just fill me in on what year that is.
In Monogram did put out 15 new molds, new tools, mostly kits, cars and trucks. They did do 4 aircraft. But you notice all of them except for one are photographs of the model. Only one of them actually has what you would call artwork. That's the B-36. And this, of course, was very popular with Monogram back then. I'm not sure about that whole Corvette America thing. What is it? Station wagon version of the Corvette. But Monogram did manage to put out 15 new molds, new toolings in 1980. So they were, and some of them were newer vehicles, but they were trying to, stay up with the times. So, give them props for that. And they put out 17 in 1981. So they were still putting out a goodly number of vehicles. And, you have to give them credit. That's one of the reasons Monogram, well, although the name isn't around that much anymore. I mean, the company, even though they took the Revell name, it was still run by, Revell had sold out, Aurora had sold out. It was still the Monogram leadership. And, a lot of the stuff still made today. I wonder how many, I'm not sure what the story is on that. If you look at the upper right, the red, looks like a 4-door Corvette America. I have no idea what the story on that is.
What's the scale on that Hornet down at the bottom?
That I believe is 148, and that may be the one I was thinking of that was in the test model program, not colors. I think I built that one. All right,
I
what is
remember
it?
building one that looked like that, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
darn sure it was a 1/32 scale, though.
It probably was. You can go to Scalemates and see. I'm trying to figure out the 4-door Corvette America. What's the story on that?
Oh, somebody out there will know.
That's why I'm asking. But
Okay.
anyway, so Monogram managed to keep itself relevant. And so basically, although not a completely comprehensive, these are the 1980 releases. A lot less than the companies had been putting out in previous years.
Rob Alta says it was a real car featured in popular hot rodding magazine.
Okay, well, there you go. By the way, in 1980, quick side note here. In fact, I made this graphic partly so I could show you guys that. to show you how certain companies are kind of on the decline. AMT only put out, MPC put out 4 new kits. AMT put out 2. US Airfix put out 2. Lindbergh and Otaki, which were still waning but players, each put out 1. Italeri managed to put out 8. And the rest of them I think we've already covered. But I just thought I would point that out. And so guys, we're going to just take a super quick break here. I'll loop the intro so you can chat with each other. And I will be back in just a minute.
That's a Firebird with a hatch on the back.
I turned the microphone off so you could not talk about me behind my back. Blah!
Yeah, you really like to take all the fun out of it, don't you?
I really, really do. Okay, and we're live again. Oh, poor Ken's been chatting up a storm and had the microphone turned off. I'm such a jerk. Told you. Around about an hour into this thing, it gets pretty fun. You're back on the air, Ken.
When the cough medicine starts kicking in.
Now you can tell them your story while I look for more pictures.
Oh, okay. Max alluded to earlier that I was he was talking about me buying another model, which is the 1/72nd scale of the Piper Warrior. I actually used to fly one.
Back then, it was just the Piper Cherokee.
No, the one I flew was a Warrior.
Yeah, but the one you bought is a Cherokee.
Oh yeah. It's the 160 horsepower version, but it doesn't have the cargo windows. It just has the 4 main windows. But I've decided to put a little twist into it. I'm gonna paint it the gold color like Max did, but I'm going to put in an interior, and I'm going to use real thin clear plastic for the side windows, and see just how fancy I can get this thing.
Okay, guys, it's time to get into some serious modeling stuff now. We are about to go into real modeler world here. Here's what I told Ken to do, and I do want your feedback if you have any advice on this matter. All right. Now, the Aurora Cherokee 160, which I think was a Cherokee C back then, before they started calling them Warriors.
Maybe you can find a picture of it.
Actually,
Of the kit that I got, not the one you got.
yeah, but you bought this. Oh, I know what you're saying. He bought the same kit, but after it had box art, which makes me think it might be an Aurora UK version. Let me check scale mates real quick. Go Cherokee. All right, 1/72nd scale. Look for Aurora. Oh, Aurora Netherlands. You said it was on the ramp, right, Ken?
Yeah, and there's some guy next to it directing them, and you could see
That's Aurora Netherlands.
something in the background. Really?
Hold on. Yep. Okay. I'm just going to put AC. Aurora Cherokee. And close that. Close that. I'm sorry, Ken. I promised you I'd look it up, and I just never had a chance. And frankly, I forgot because, well, it just wasn't that important.
Of course.
Don't mean to be hurtful, but if I am, well, that's the way of things. Let's see. Yeah. There we go. All right, that's it. You'll see it in about 7 seconds. Yeah, you're right. It is the same kit. I thought it was Aurora UK. It's Aurora Netherlands. People tend to forget how big of an international presence Aurora had. That was one of the reasons they stayed in business as long as they did. I mean, God bless them. Those guys were aggressive. And there it is. You should more or less see it now. It is a Cherokee 180, which is the plane you flew. Just back then, they called it. The name Warrior hadn't been tacked. Well, actually, the Warrior went on the 160. The Archer was the 180. You flew an Archer, not a.
No, I flew the 161.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. If you flew the 161, that's the one with the tapered wing.
It is.
Okay, so this is a Hershey bar wing.
I know, but it's close enough.
Okay, let me explain that little tidbit to folks. I know some of you guys already know. Piper, the original Pipers, like this one in the picture, had what's called a Hershey bar wing because the wing was shaped like a Hershey bar. It was a slab wing, and it wasn't a bad wing. It was a slightly high drag, but also high lift wing. The airplane had good performance, but it had a few little characteristics that Piper wanted to engineer out of it. Now, Cessna's had a tapered wing. It was a Hershey bar about halfway out, and then it tapered. And that gave them, it was a little longer, gave them some nice handling characteristics, especially at low speed. So Piper decided to make their version of that. So this airplane would have been a PA-28-180, which meant Piper Cherokee 180 horsepower engine. When they put the new wing on it, they gave it the number 181 to show that it had the new tapered wing. That's
and the 161.
Same thing applied for all of them. Any Piper where the dash number ends in a 1 has the tapered wing. That goes for the Cherokee. It goes for the Saratoga. It goes for the
Cadet.
Cadet. Yeah.
Archer, Arrow.
Archer, Dakota, all of them. They also started giving them names. The Cherokee C, and became the 160 became the Warrior. The 180 became the Archer. The 235 became the Dakota. They used to call it a Cherokee 235, and then they gave it that tapered wing and gave it a name, the Dakota.
And the 200s became the Arrow.
The Arrow, that's right. Oh, that was the other one. I think of the Arrow.
Except that one had retracts.
Yeah, the Arrow was this airplane you're looking at right now with a 200 horse engine and a retractable landing gear. And I instructed them. And I flew both Arrows with the tapered wing and the Hershey bar wing. The Hershey bar wing, I think, was a little faster, but it had more of a sink to it. Although the tapered wing had a little more, was a little nicer, but it was a little more drag. I mean, nothing's free in aviation. It's just like a boat. You give something up to get something. But anyway, Ken bought this, and if I know him, he'll do a magnificent job. But we're debating on the best way to go about making a detailed interior where you can see it. Now, that's what gets into what I was going to talk to you guys about. Now we're actually back to really serious modeling technique. Now, anyone who's built this kit or any Aurora kit from this era, or any kit from this era, knows that the glass, especially the side windows, tend to be very thick. You can't really see through them. You detail the interior, you build the model, you peel the tape off, you look in, you can't see squat for all that exquisite detail you put inside it. Ken wants to make a detailed interior, including a printed copy the instrument panel, the works. So what I recommended is get some thin. First off, step one, paint the fuselage halves before you even get started. Clean them, wash them, prime them, paint them. Put all your detail work and everything with the paint on the sides of the airplane before you put anything together. Okay, get all that done. Then you can detail out the interior, but for the windows, you need to hand cut some thin plastic. Now, I know there's that stuff, that liquid you can put in that'll build up windows. I've used it, but the dries clear, but it's still pretty opaque. You want to use some really fine quality, clear, thin plastic stock to make windows for it. Use the window seal or white glue to glue them in place and let them harden. Once they're hardened, and I mean for a couple of days, they're genuinely cured. Put a little piece of something like clear, thin plastic over to something, and then tape over that to protect it. Okay. Then put your fuselage inside, put all your sides together, glue it together, bond it. Then you can sand the seams while everything's protected under tape. And you can make the cleanup and paint and prime and that where the seams were at, and get a nice looking airplane. Then when everything's together, you can peel it off, and all of that thin, clear plastic should be pristine and thin enough that you can still appreciate the detail that's inside and actually see the inside. The other option would be to detail the entire model with no glass in it, just stuffing cotton or something in there. Once you're done, pick it all out and then seat the windows, but that might mar the finish that you went through all that trouble to put on the airplane. But those two techniques, the way I would recommend it, because if you try to sand and file and paint the airplane after you put those thin windows in and tape them off, you're almost guaranteed to damage them when you peel the tape, assuming it even holds that well. It just seems like that's my read. So I'm interested to hear you guys' approaches on that. I'm waiting for comments to flow up, but there's a lag time between when I speak and when they get it, and they need time to respond.
Paul Adams said Airfix did a 1/72nd scale Piper Cherokee Arrow.
That is correct. Almost bought one, but the guy wanted about $40 for it. I would really like to get one of those just because I used to instruct in them. And
I paid $45 for this with shipping.
I'm an airline pilot, Ken. I'm cheap. It's in our DNA. So
I've always had a soft spot for the Warriors. I really enjoy flying that plane.
Okay, to let you guys know, Ken and I have had this sort of running little debate. I wouldn't call it a feud. I'm a Cessna man. He's a Piper man. Now, having said that, doesn't mean I won't fly a Piper. Don't like them. I love Pipers, but I used to instruct in Florida, the Sunshine State, with enough humidity to choke a badger. All right? Which is why we don't have badgers here. We don't have badgers in Florida, do we, Ken? Anyway.
Not that I've seen. And by the way, Phaser, Max has told me that Minicraft kits are good.
Yeah, they are. They are very good. Now, the Minicraft kits, actually, I was just looking at this earlier today. Some of the Minicraft kits are actually something else first, but yeah, they're very good. I built that Minicraft Bonanza. I was thoroughly impressed with it, and the Minicraft B-29. I have no real complaints with them. I mean, nothing serious. Some of the fits are kind of tight, but no, they're very detailed. That Bonanza was amazingly detailed. Unfortunately, I lost one of the windows to it, but I'm like, yeah, I don't care. It looks good on the shelf. I just turned that side away from me. Yeah, that's how I roll. So anyway, I used to instruct in Florida and in unair-conditioned airplanes. Now, I'll tell you why I like Cessna. And Ken's argument...
Wine.
So Ken, I'm going to tell you Ken's argument in a minute. And there are some merits to it.
Oh, thank you.
The Cessna 172 and 150 with the high wing, here's what they have going for them. A gravity feed fuel system. You don't have to worry about an engine pump failure for the fuel because it's gravity feed. They have a fuel selector that says left, right, both. You put it on both, and you forget about it. Just don't run out of gas. Spring steel landing gear. Boingy, boingy, boingy. If you break the landing gear, you're going to break a lot of other stuff too. And shade. They offer shade because the wing is above you. And
Wine.
And fifth, they have count them, 2 doors with opening. I say again, opening windows.
Okay? I say again, wine.
So you can get that 290 air conditioning. That's 2 windows open, 90 miles an hour. The Piper has the advantage of when you bank the airplane, you can see the runway because the wing is out of your view. And when you have to refuel the airplane, it's a low wing, so it's
Let's go back to that previous little one.
You don't have to climb a ladder. Ken, that is the reason the airplane has a big round dial in the middle called a compass.
Okay,
so in a Cessna, I know if I'm going 180 degrees and I got to turn base, I turn left 90 degrees, roll the wing. Oh, what do you know? There's a runway right where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and while you're turning with that big old wing in the way, something could get there.
Yay. Whereas when you're turning that big old wing down below you, something can come up from underneath. That dog ain't going to hunt.
Not nearly as likely.
And
it's happened. I know it's happened, but not nearly as likely. Besides, usually it's going to be something in front of you, not under you.
Just remember, it's always Pipers landing on top of Cessnas, not Cessnas landing on top of Pipers.
I'd rather have it that way.
Anyway, I may crush your airplane, but it's a price I'm willing to pay. Anyway, so in Florida, when you get into a Piper to give flight instruction, from the time you slide yourself into that cockpit, you are profusely sweating. And the only little window they have is a little 4-inch storm window on the side, which is better than nothing, but it ain't much. So
a lot of people just leave the door open.
Well, yeah, they do tend to leave the door open when they're taxiing, but when you take off and fly, you got to close it. And you're not getting up in the cooler temperatures. You're doing a lot of traffic pattern work at 1,000 feet. And that just gets, and the sun's beating down through the plexiglass. Don't get me wrong, folks. A flight instructor earns every penny they're getting to begin with. And when you're not in the deep south or someplace where it's hot, or when it's wintertime down here, it's very, very nice. But in the summertime, the warmer months, which in here is about 9 of them, it's rough.
There's summer and not summer.
There's summer and December, January, February. Don't get me wrong, though. If somebody gave me a Piper, I'd be very, very tickled. They're wonderful little airplanes. I enjoy them immensely. But that's a little disagreement he and I have been having for, 30 years?
Yeah, we go back and forth on that every once in a while.
Now, I told you guys earlier, there are going to be some changes here in the near future, possibly. Again, don't mention it, Ken. Hasn't happened yet. Still in the ether. But either way, I'm going to have to
Why are you saying it?
I'm not. I just don't want you to. Because you will.
I learned my lesson last week.
Poppycock. Anyway, I've got a bunch of these models that I'd used in my Battle of Midway thing, and I just can't bring. Some of them are missing parts and stuff, but I can't bring myself to throw them away. Got a couple of, that's an Airfix 1/72 scale Devastator TBD-1. I got a couple of Monogram 148s. I have no idea why I took two pictures of this one. And let's see what else we got here. Picture will rotate in a second. A couple of 148 scale zeros. The bottom was actually a roof that I cut the float off of. And I don't want to throw them away. So there's the Monogram 148 scale Marauder. Of course, all the windows are frosted on purpose to stop, or the glass isn't there. There's the 172nd scale Catalina. That was so they wouldn't reflect the green light on the camera. But I'm going to have to get rid of some of these. There's a 172nd scale Airfix with no windshield. and a little TBD in the background, and some little 1-350, I think, or one. There's a D4Y, and you can see I just painted the windows black on that one. This is all for camera. I don't even know if I used that one actually, but and the RE and later what was it, Ace 1-144 Emily. And I think I have a couple of these Avengers. That was supposed to be Dick Best playing with the Albert with the tail wheel stuck down. There's another 148 scale Devastator. But anyway, these are very rough builds. What?
Parts is parts.
Parts is parts. There's I think a 148 scale Wildcat. I forget who made that one. It might have been a Monogram kit. But anyway, that one, that Japanese float plane I didn't actually build. I got it as part of a lot purchase, but I did add the spinny prop to it. But that's not. But anyway, I'm going to be getting rid of the top is a Hawk / Testers SBD. Have one or two of those in 1/72 scale. I'm going to be getting rid of these, and if anybody wants one, and I've already had one person ask for one. I figure as gracious as you guys have been to me, I'm not going to worry about the shipping cost. I'll just, if you want just to have a little piece of Max's Models history, I'll just send you one. If you have a particular one you're interested in, let me know. If you just want one just as a keepsake, whatever.
You gonna tell them how it works?
Okay, this is the plan. Email me. Tell me which ones you prefer if you have a preference. Then I will just draw the names at random and go down the list. If you're the first person I pick, you'll get your first choice. If you're the second one that comes out, you'll get the second choice, or for whatever's available. If your first choice is available, you get like a seniority system. But I want it to be random. I don't want to play any favorites. And I'll just mail them out to you. Just make sure to email me with your full mailing address and country and everything. I have one gent in Ireland who's already said he'd like one, so whatever's left over, he didn't care which one, so whatever's left over, I'll send to him. And I imagine I'll probably run out of people who are interested in getting these junkers before I run out of models. So the last person will probably get whatever's left over in a box, especially if it's domestic U.S. shipping.
Well, that's not quite what we had talked about. It's
okay,
close.
remind me.
Okay, what you do is you email in if you have a preference. If you don't, just say that. But if you have a preference, just, hey, I'd like the PBY, or hey, I'd like the Dauntless, or whatever it is that he has there. And he'll put a list up there somewhere. Just say, hey, I'd like to have that. And then give it a week, maybe two, whatever. And if there's more than one person who wants a particular airplane, we'll put it into a random number generator or throw dice or whatever, and then we'll pick somebody from that list.
Okay, you just volunteered to handle that part then. You lost me at random number generator, but okay.
Or dice, or whatever. Whatever. You just close your eyes and just point at a name and say, okay, that person got the bottle.
What is that, an episode of The Simpsons where Schwarzenegger's the president and it's the movie, I think, and he goes, I'm a decider. He just points at one of the option plans randomly in. We put the dome over Springfield.
Something like that. Or you put names in the hat. It doesn't really matter. If you want a particular model, state you would like that particular model. And if there's more than one person, we'll randomly pick that and send it off to you.
And I'll tell you what, if a bunch of people answer, I will probably, if I actually run out of models before I run out of people, which I don't anticipate happening, but if that happens, I'll probably just send you one of the kits off the shelf. You people have been so generous to me, I don't think you guys would mind me resharing. And I have some 300 kits. I had 12 kits in my stash when I started, when I went out for my hip and started this channel the way it is now. I now have over 300. So I just can't be stingy. It wouldn't be right.
Okay, you got to send an email. You can't just put it in the comments.
No, yeah, you got to send the email. Come on, a little effort. Minimum effort. That reminds me, I want to, again, harp on what I harped on at the beginning of the video, because we have a few more folks here now. Oh, we've lost some people. Ken, you're boring. They left. If you guys are interested, if you ever go to the Box Art Den, they need to, and I would never ask for money for myself, which is why I don't see myself ever doing Patreon, but it's time for them to renew their 3-year thing for their website, and they got a donate thing. And if I sent $25, you can send a few bucks their way, $5, $1, whatever. Boxartden.com. They do great work. They've inspired me. They let me use their stuff all the time, so obviously I want to help them. And I think they have a section.
Okay, you got to list your email. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
maxismodels@yahoo.com. Here, let's see. Plus, there's a text thing on here. Hold on. Scenes, video. Well, that's interesting.
If you want to pay shipping, I don't know, Max. How do you want to handle that? If they want to pay for shipping, like if you got to send it to New Zealand or something.
You know what? I'll just hold on. maxismodels@yahoo.com. Okay.
Yeah, you can send it to the same email for your build pictures.
Yeah. Okay, I just put that in there. It should be showing on the screen somewhere. What happened? Oh, I got to type it there.
Ken is not boring.
Spend an hour with him. Okay, let's shrink that puppy down.
Well, on 644, you showed up just in time to get the model giveaway.
Okay, there it is. maxismodels@yahoo.com. They're on the that side. No, wait a minute. Look, that side over there. I'll probably just ship it. I mean, if it's $100 or something, I might contact the seller and go, yeah, look. But unfortunately, I have shipped stuff to people. I have shipped folks to people. That's me, the human smuggler. I have shipped stuff to people, a few odds and ends. I sent one to Madagascar that, and it was $20-$30 to send the guy an empty box because he wanted a box for his kit. But I don't know, Ken, the folks here have sent a lot of nice stuff to me. I mean, worth a lot of money. It would be kind of a jerky mood to quibble about a few bucks. I'm brave now that I got my medical renewed and I'm back for another 6 months. But we'll work something out. I'll probably just send it to you. Money is. If you guys have ever seen that movie, Margin Call, when I think it's Jeremy Irons gives the speech to the guy that got canceled, not Stanley Tucci.
Nobody knows what you're talking about.
Anyway, he talks about how money it's all made up, and I'm like, I try not to get too worried about little things like that. Models are more important than money. And other great witticisms from a guy who you should not be taking advice from.
Okay.
No, look, as generous as everyone's been to me, I see the stamps. I know how much some of you guys have spent in shipping. Never mind the cost of what was in the box. Ken, I can't bring myself to quibble about it. If somebody's got something, and I pull their name out of the hat, I'm just going to send it to them. Don't worry about the cost, guys. If you want one, let me know and I'll send it to you. I mean, the money's forgotten about in a day. So, but the trinket, the thing, And to be honest with you, I think it's kind of cool to think that folks around the globe have got a little something that I built in the TARDIS, that's... there's a glow to that I can't really put a price on. I'm still thrilled that, we still got we got 121 people watching a guy, talk about model. The whole thing blows me away. We got one from Australia, New Zealand. We got some from the UK. It thrills me no end that people are having it. What really, really makes me happy is that folks are just coming here and having a good time. There is enough crap in the world.
Lance said my local USPS plays soccer with packages before delivering. Then the driver just chucks it over the gate.
Hey, got there. Yeah. Neither rain nor sleet nor dark of night shall keep this appointed courier from his rounds.
No, all pilots are not millionaires. Only the ones that get to be Max's age.
Okay, since he brought that up, I am going to bore you guys with a little aviation financial trivia. All right.
Fill them in, Max. Not everybody knows about this.
Oh, hold on. Before I get on that, I want to make sure we had a good audience before I did this. I want to thank Michael. These showed up today. These are Master 132nd scale B-25s, of which I have been sent some thanks to you glorious glue troopers, which is why I'm not going to be stingy about mailing stuff out. I just want to make sure Michael got a shout out for that. It is true that senior airline captains make bank. We had one guy at my employer who 10 years ago was making $400,000 to $500,000 a year. Now he was an instructor, a check airman, and his antics actually caused a change in company regulations. Okay, check airmen give check rides, and they get check airman pay, which is well above what a normal pilot makes. And he always gave them these check rides at check captain pay on transcons across the country, which are 6 hours long. He would then hold on. No. That's only half the equation. He would then deadhead back to the East Coast at check airman wages in the back, sleeping or drinking coffee, or as we say, dozing for dollars. Okay? And this is some years. This is probably over a decade ago. And when the average captain at my airline was making $200,000 a year, he was making $5 or $4, enough that it showed up on their radar. And then they instituted rules about that.
But not all pilots make that kind of money.
No. This is, if you want to make bank as an airline pilot, first off, you have what you need to be. Well, okay, this is going to vary with the airline. But generally you're speaking about line holding, long distance pilots, often international. And they do make a high hourly rate. And a lot of them are nearing retirement, so they want to put money away. So the last 10 years of their career, they're making the big dollars. But when they come in as a new hire first officer, and back in the day, a flight engineer, I mean, they made a livable wage, but not great. And they spent 20 to 30 years at an airline to get up to that point, so that in the last 10 or 15 years, they could cash in. And
then not all of them make it.
No, airlines go broke, guys medical out. There's all manner of crap that goes wrong that will, totally tank those plans. And it's unfortunate. I mean, life is risk, But I know guys that, good Lord, it breaks my heart to think about it.
Hey, when you first started out, I was feeding you.
My first job at an airline was in 1997 as a first officer on a Beech 1900 turboprop 19-seater with Mesa Airlines. My take-home pay was $248 a week. That was after taxes. That was $2 less than I made on unemployment. I had been on unemployment and gotten $250 a week. I used to laugh about that until I cried. Or maybe it was I cried about it until I could learn to laugh about it. Whatever the point. But you know what? I was 37 years old, single, didn't have any expenses. My car was paid for, junker that it was. And the air conditioner worked in Florida. That's really all that matters. Hey, a working AC and an AM radio, what more do you need? Priorities. I lived in a guy's unfinished mother-in-law college where I am not joking, and it does get cold in Florida in January and February. I left the gas oven open with the heat going, left the oven open because I didn't trust that butane heater that he had. And in the winter, there was a wall unit to keep it cool. I ate an all-you-can-eat Chinese place for $5.99, and I was having the time of my freaking life, bouncing between Panama City, Orlando, Tampa, West Palm, Fort Walton and back to Panama. I mean, and no autopilot. I was never a better pilot than the last day I walked off that, and I can remember like it happened yesterday. The last day I walked off that airplane. Never made captain on it because I went first officer on the jet. And the jump from a right seat of a twin-engine turboprop with no autopilot, no flight management system, well, very basic flight management system, to a Canadair regional jet, which is a great airplane, with all of the airline systems, that was the biggest challenge in training I've ever had. And I remember the night before my check ride as a first officer on that plane, I could not sleep. I mean, I kept trying to go to sleep, and I kept waking up. I was literally doing approaches and go-arounds in my head trying to fall asleep. I was having dreams about flying go-arounds. I'm not even joking here. I'm not even exaggerating. The anxiety level was through the roof, and and the check airman that I had, who I think may be in my company now. Anyway, he was a very mellow, very easygoing guy, but very professional. He wasn't gonna let anything slide. You had to, he worked off the syllabus, and it was yes or no. He did it. Actually, he was very good check airman in that regard. He was very neutral. He didn't want to fail you, but if you didn't meet a standard, he wasn't gonna let you slide. But he also didn't do anything to enhance your stress level, which he knew was through the roof. So kudos on him for that. But anyway, the thing I was really worried about was in the CRJ, they give you a go-around with a thrust reverser deploy. This is the nightmare of nightmare scenarios. And you literally you hit a low men's approach, you can't get in, you toga, you have to manually push the throttles forward, and one of them pops out of your hand because the CRJ has a cable between the throttle and the thrust reverser. And if the thrust reverser deploys, it mechanically pulls the throttle back to idle, so you don't have too much asymmetric thrust. And it happens. I remember fighting that thing, and I knew this was coming. It's part of the syllabus. And I got the rudder buried, and I'm fighting it. And I can remember out of the corner of my eye, at 300 feet indicated, seeing the terrain come back into view because your IMC instruments, and seeing the treetops come back into view because the airplane's trying to sink. And I am just focused on keeping that little the little airplane symbol buried inside the little flight path symbol. And that was my universe at that point. Everything else be damned, and you are just zeroed in on it. And finally, it's like, terrain, 300, 350, 400. And it's slowly with that. And of course, the simulator's shimmying because you got a thrust reverser deployed. And you're just, and I'm thinking, this is it. This is where they make you or break you. This is where you earn your money. And finally, it slowly starts to climb out. And at about 500 feet, they freeze the thing. Okay, you made a good, go around, flaps up, da-da-da. And, at that point, you made it. Because the rest of the stuff is fairly administrative. I walked out of that simulator about as wrung out as you can get. There wasn't a dry stitch of clothes on me. And we're up in Montreal. And at the CAE facility. That's the people who make the simulators. And part of Bombardier. And I went out. I was so happy when he signed me off as a first officer on the CRJ. I've got it somewhere. I should grab it and show you guys. I went out and bought what was then a $300 fleece-lined bomber jacket, which I still have to this day. It is probably my most valued clothing possession. And that is not only because I love that coat. It's like what the waist gunners used to wear on the B-17s, the big B-3 jackets. But it's also because it simulates. This is when I became a jet pilot. And we had guys, pretty competent pilots that have washed out of that program. And I really was, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I was proud of myself. That was a big day in my life. I can remember walking around the streets of Montreal. It was crisp it wasn't snowing or anything, but it was very cold and crisp outside. And I put that new bomber jacket on, just strutted back to the hotel like I was king of the mountain. All of a sudden, this all got about me again. Good move, Ken.
How did that happen?
So,
and then there was another time you were in the simulator, and the captain, not the captain, the simulator guy, we'll call him that, the instructor, threw something at you, and you started to lose it, but you brought it back, and after you were done, he said, That's the first time I ever seen anybody recover like that.
I know what you're talking about, and I can't remember it. God, I've had so many sim sessions, but I do remember that happening, and there were a
You
couple of
just pulled it. You just pulled it together, and you really impressed the guy. He says, "I've." Almost everybody just loses it because they're thinking about their mistake instead of what they should be doing.
yeah, I forget if I had to do a 360 barrel roll with the plane to recover from wake, or if that was when I remember that event, but I forget what it was that I did. Ugh. Good times in the simulator. Um, in other news, you guys will be happy to know that I got an email from Mike Machat today of Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat. And he sent me this picture that he took of this Pratt Reed glider. And you may have guessed, the pilot who owns this airplane just happens to be a naval aviator. I'm not sure if you could have guessed that. But he and I will be doing a documentary together on the record-setting glider flights. Now, I just finished reading this book, Exploring the Monster, that was sent to me by a wonderful glue trooper. This book's by Robert Whelan. And I thought the book was going to be more about weather. By the way, this is a lenticular cloud because of the lens shape. Anyway. This actually turned out to be more about the people who did this research in the 40s and 50s. The crap that they did. I actually remember reading this and getting scared, physically, like, holy crap, because I've been in situations like that, and I was like, Jesus, 50, 60, 70,000 feet in a sailplane, sucking off oxygen, no pressure suits. They lost both the gliders eventually to accidents, and one of them, which is near the end, it just disintegrated the guy. And I've been in that kind of turbulence, and I'm always telling people, stay away from that crap. And this book validated every fear about bad weather that I've had. And I used to be young and brave, and now I'm old and cowardly. And you can bet I am not going to be the guy on the news whose airplane came apart on him in a thunderstorm. Because I will turn around and run away, before I will challenge some of the stuff Mother Nature can do.
Mm-hmm. You'll live a lot longer that way.
One is to hope. But anyway, Mike sent me that photo of this is Pratt Reeds were training gliders that were bought by the Navy in World War II, and where the Navy found eventually didn't have much use for them, so they wound up in the civilian secondhand market. It's a side by side, by the way. Now the one that they rebuilt for this test, they did a lot of changes to, a lot of modifications, but man. They were going higher than airliners in the 40s and 50s. I mean, it's insane. And by the way,
gliders quite often set speed records.
Yep. Now, bear in mind, quick note, and I think I've got this right. And Mike, if you watch this, email me if I'm wrong. A sailplane and a glider. This is technically a sailplane because at the point of release, it can climb higher than the altitude it was released at. Gliders, in the purest sense, are more like the Horsa and CG-4 gliders of World War II at Normandy, that the airplane lets them go, and from there they just come down. This is a sailplane, but it's called soaring. So, anyway. And there's only one company I found that makes a model of the Pratt Reed. It did. And that's a resin company. And I have no idea if they're still around. Anyway, one other thing was...
I got a question for you before you go on that.
Go.
Have you flown a sailplane?
Yes. I towed sailplanes up at Woodbine, which you probably remember, up in Maryland. And there were two ways you get checked out as a tow pilot. Either do several simulated tows, but we didn't have a two-seat airplane because we were flying Piper 235 Pawnees, which only had a single seat, which is why I value that model that was sent to me by a glue trooper of the Pawnee that I have on my shelf to this day. I painted it up similar to the one that I flew, or one of the two of them that I flew. Or you can go for 3 flights in a sailplane. I elected for the 3 flights, really the only option I had, but I'd always... The funny thing is they had sailplanes at the airport I grew up on, but I never had a chance to ride or fly one. And I went up my Schweitzer 233, and I did 3 flights, and I absolutely loved it. It was massive amounts of fun. The guy showed me how to box the wake and all this other stuff. And getting a glider rating is not a walk in the park. It ain't a walk in the park, Kazansky. Anyway, yes, I have, and gliders are awesome. And people don't appreciate they have a very high accident rate, as is also talked about in this book. They come apart in weather, and there's some guys that wind up, because you can get a lot of lift in these clouds and everything, and there are people that have flown into cumulonimbus trying to get lift, and they wind up hitting turbulence that literally tore the plane apart, and they are fairly fragile. And one parting thing before we go, because we're coming up on 9 o'clock.
Max used to be an instructor.
Well, I was a CFI and double I and MEI, but I didn't want a glider instructor. I don't have a glider rating. Maybe when I retire.
Sligo just asked if you can teach flying.
I used to be able to. I let it all lapse because I didn't realize until some years after, having that stuff becomes a liability. Apparently, the attitude of the feds is, if you're a flight instructor and you're riding in a plane and the pilot does something stupid, you're on the hook because you're an instructor and you should have told him otherwise. How do you like them apples? Loud ice noise coming. Unfortunately, Steve couldn't join us tonight. He had things to do, but hopefully he'll watch this later. Who recognizes this? I'm not even going to say what it is at first. I'm going to wait for someone to comment. And Ken, if you know, don't say.
All right, I'll be quiet.
Steve at Steve's Model Mania had said, you got to watch this movie. And so I went out on YouTube. He sent me a link and I watched it. And I'm waiting for somebody to put an answer down there. I know we need about a 20-second lapse or time, but I could not stop laughing. The movie was so 1950s, and it wasn't actually bad. It was cliche, but there we go. OT got it. Tobor, which is what? Somebody real quick, tell me what?
I'll be quiet.
Tell me, except for you, Ken. Somebody type in what Tobor means. Tobor. It's Tobor. Come on, someone figure it out. They say it in the movie. Spelled backwards, phaser guy. It's robot spelled backwards. This is science fiction, basically made for kids. But what I love about this movie is, and I did find somebody made a resin model of Tobor. I meant to get it, but I couldn't find it. But what I really love about this movie is, you'll notice, I think in the next photo, is that the scene where they have to fend off the bad guys. You'll notice bottom center, there's a 9-year-old with a shotgun. Only in a movie made in that time could you get away with having a kid carrying a shotgun. And when the bad guys try to steal Tobor, they all come out blasted. You know? But the kid is armed to the teeth. I'm like, I love it. Hey, Tobor could drive a Jeep. When he knocks out the MP and just takes it. But I was like, of course, Tobor is the kid's friend. This is a friendly robot. But when the kid's in danger, Tobor goes ape. But here we have the kid holding a shotgun. And the bad guys show up and everybody runs out with their bathrobes with shotguns, including the 9-year-old. Oh, they were different times.
Oh, Wendell just brought up something interesting. I was going to say something, but I was being quiet. You remember Tobor the Eighth Man?
Was that the same name? Or that was Tobar?
No, that was his. Well, the Eighth Man pretended he was a real person, and Tobor was his name when he was pretending to be a real person.
All right, I don't remember that one.
You don't remember? It was animated. I think it might have been Japanese, but I'm not sure about that.
What are the odds?
Anybody else remember the Eighth Man? besides Wendell?
There probably was a toy named Toba or Ken. There probably. I'm talking to the other Ken. We have a couple of Kens here. Oh
I'm
my
the
God, I am
youngest.
really resisting saying it when we have more than one Ken. It's coming out. I can't stop it. Ken.
It's all right. It's a good name. When I
Yeah.
was in college, in my Fortran class, there were 2 other kids in my class that had the name Ken. It was crazy. I'd never had anything like that happen before or since.
Well, I rarely have another Max in the crowd, although there has been an occasion. The one I get all the time is, "Oh, we had a dog named Max." Hmm.
Nope, nobody else has seen it.
By the way, FYI, guys, I'm just drinking water.
Oh, you don't need cough medicine anymore?
The cough medicine has done its job. Water.
Okay.
Cool
Well,
water.
all right. Can he do? All right. While we're winding down,
Con. And now it starts. By the way, I want to give a shout out to my stepson Lou Diaz, who did the intro music that I was using. And on the break, I want to do that 80s thing. My wife helped me put together those pictures, especially the names of the songs and everything. We were mocking the 80s bands. There's a meme floating around that shows the General Zod and his 2 cronies from the original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. And they said, you don't know anything about the 80s if you can't identify this pop band. I was like, wait a minute, that's General Zod and his characters from the Superman movie. And Barry sent that to me, I think, originally. Hey, Barry, you didn't think you get a shout out for that? So I decided, as you know what, the 80s is a great theme because we're dealing with. That's what actually we owe Barry a thanks. He gave me the idea for tonight's live stream about modeling in the 80s because that really was when kit models, as we know at the companies, really started their decline. I mean, it started in the 70s, but the 80s is when they were on a downhill slide. That's why I put together this Excel spreadsheet showing with what information I get from ScaleMates, with all the information about how model companies were making less and less or more and more. I mean, Lindbergh only made one, Otaki only made one. This was shortly before they basically ceased operations, and but the Japanese companies were on the climb. So I thought the 80s, and Lou Diaz, my stepson, made, he'll always be Eduardo to me, but Eduardo Luis, made he put that little sound thing together for me because the royalties issues is getting to be a big deal with YouTube. So he's writing my music for me now. And he does the intro that I use a lot of the times, most of the time now. That's all his work. He's a really talented young man. And I just want to give him a shout out for all of that. And I will loop the intro so you guys can chat amongst each other for a while. So any parting shots, guys, before we go?
well, somebody had asked earlier, and I said we postpone it. We could slide it in here in the last few minutes. They wanted to know how we met.
Okay, the short story is Ken and I both worked for the same guy. I was a pilot for a guy named Stan Shapiro up in Maryland, and Ken had been contracted to do some work for him. I walked into his office one day, and I saw this guy in a leather flying jacket working on a computer, and he introduced me to him, and it turned out Ken had a private pilot's license and had actually fielded some software. What was the name of your software package? Flight Base. And it was Ken had realized that all the software, now mind you, this is, what was this, 1990, 89, 90? 89?
Yeah, somewhere around there, yeah.
It was 89. And Ken had realized that all the software packages were orientated towards IFR, instrument pilots. So he made one called Flight Base orientated towards the VFR pilot. And he had advertisements in magazines and was trying to sell it. And he sold a few, but he was basically a one-man show. And with some money and some investment, it probably could have been a thing. But you were competing against people that were better funded. So,
oh, yeah.
You were the dark horse. But to your credit, By God, you sold some. You backed. I remember you had that big reel-to-reel machine, so you could download the updates from the FAA and everything, and he kept it
Yeah,
updated. And
I had a magnetic tape reader, or it wrote too, that went on the big computers I had hooked up to my PC through a special board.
Ken always had a very entrepreneurial spirit. What he never had was proper funding. He's had, you guys, you go to a restaurant and the people they'll walk up to your table and they take your card right there. You're talking to the man on the communicator who actually pioneered that, but he never had the money to get it critical mass. Others eventually figured it out. And Ken, you are the right guy with the right idea. You've just never had the backing that you needed.
Mm.
But you know what? There's comfort in the knowledge that you were ahead of the curve.
I'd like to have seen some of that translated into some money.
Yeah,
Oh,
I would like. Well, no, Ken. What you'd like to have seen it translate into is a 38-foot sailboat in the Caribbean.
There you go.
Money is only the medium of exchange. In of itself, it has no value. Only the value we give it.
Yeah.
And we give it value.
Yeah. One other little thing I'll bring up real quick before we sign off is that when I was demonstrating the software to Max's boss, he asked Max to come in, to critique it since he was the company pilot. And so I'm showing it to Stan, and Max is just picking it apart. Well, it doesn't do this, or it doesn't have that, or what if you want?
I was a dick.
He wasn't a real big fan of my program.
Well, you were. I also was an IFR guy. Was CFI, double I, and all that stuff. And I thought in those terms, and I wasn't thinking like a private pilot with a Cessna 140, which for that it was fine. But also, software. The problem you had, Ken, was you were competing against teams of people. You were one guy working by yourself, doing what frankly was a pretty impressive job, but you were competing against companies that had deep pockets and lots of people working, and the technology sailed out so fast that it would have been impossible for you by yourself to keep up. I mean, you're the right guy with the right idea, but the you and I both know the one thing about a capitalist system, it's dog eat dog. They take no prisoners. And Ken, what I would have liked,
but it will definitely buy you a lifestyle that you can definitely enjoy.
Yeah, but oh well. You and I have been around long enough to see the jerks win enough times to realize that, I love one of my favorite. You guys know I love Firefly. And one of my favorite little speeches.
Great show and movie.
One of my favorite ones is the movie Serenity that followed it up. And I cannot say his name. You watch Tai Chochifor, that famous actor. When he thinks he's going to stab Mal before he gets, throat chopped, he just goes, contrary to, no, I'm sorry, it's earlier. Contrary to what you think, the Alliance is not the evil empire. You are not the plucky hero, and this is not the grand arena. And I'm thinking to myself, there was a lot of truth in that and a lot of falsehood. Actually, the Alliance kind of is the evil empire. And this was about to become the grand arena. And Mal, in fact, was the plucky hero. So, to paraphrase the late Luke Skywalker, because he was late after this, is that, amazing. Everything you just said is wrong. But anyway.
That was a fun fight that Mel had with that guy with the sword.
Yeah. He killed me with a sword, Mel. But
no, not that guy. That was in the movie. I'm talking about in that one TV show.
Oh, Mercy is a sign of a great man. Poke. Well, I guess I'm just a good one. Poke. Well, I'm all right. The name of that episode is Shindig, and it may be my favorite episode. And but that show is so full of great Whedonisms. But one of my favorites is the movie Serenity, when he tells Summer Glau's character that he says, if somebody tries to kill you, you kill them right back.
I aim to misbehave.
I aim to misbehave. That is a T-shirt. There are two T-shirts that I love. One, I aim to misbehave, and the other one's from Tombstone, and that's your say when, say when, Johnny Ringo, say when. Well, guys, I'm going to let you go. Jane Cobb's that they call him Jane.
That was a great episode.
That was awesome.
Oh
my God. One thing you can say about Firefly and Serenity, they never had a dull or bad episode. They only went one season, which is a shame, but they never lost their mojo. All right, Ken, I'm going to sign off with the good people, and I'm going to let them leave the intro running so they can chat amongst themselves. You can turn down the volume if you don't like lose 80s beats, and pretty good for a kid who was born in the 90s. But guys, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I hope you had a good time. Take care, and as always, model on.
Bye, everybody.